Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPhone 14 Plus is one of those phones that nobody seemed to care about when it came out, but it turns out that it's pretty great, and it depends on a few factors whether or not it's worth it. So I thought we'd review the phone since it's been 306 days since its release, and this is actually my daughter's phone, and this is the one that she uses full time. So she's sort of been using it full time so we can take a look at the battery life, see how it's held up as far as durability and more. Now, the design is really nice. It's a very large phone, very similar to that of the 13 Pro Max, and is something that if you like large screens, you'll be pretty happy with its overall display being very large and just being pretty decent overall. Now, I say decent because it's lacking some features of the Pro phones that I think Apple should have included. But overall, the design, size, and weight is pretty great. The weight is fairly light because it's made out of aluminum, and due to that, it just feels much lighter than the other phones, and according to many, it has the best battery life. Now, as far as overall durability, it's been in this Apple case. We'll take a closer look at that in a moment, but it's been in an Apple case and had a screen protector on it. My daughter tends to drop the phone from time to time, and if we go around it, you'll see that the actual cameras don't really have any scratches on them or anything like that. There's not a single ding or dent around the outside edge, and the ports are holding up fine, no issues there. Everything looks basically brand new. So again, we have that screen protector you can see around the outside edge. So no issues there whatsoever. It's held up really well. And of course, a case will do that. And also, this case is not holding up that well, but there's no scratches on the phone thanks to it. But if we look inside, it's just microfiber. This is one of Apple's silicone cases or silicone cases. And along the outside edge, it's had some dings on it. They don't tend to hold up very well over a long period of time. It's got a nick here on the side. If we go around the outside edge, it's just not very durable, but at least it's protected the phone. So you'll see all of the different nicks and scratches all over it. But again, it's protected the phone, it's done its job, it just doesn't look very great. So you'll need to replace it after a while. Now, as far as the battery life on this phone, the battery is one of the best out there just because of its overall size. Now, if we go into our settings and we go to battery health and charging, you'll see this one's currently at 100% battery health. It's never been on a beta, it's been running the regular updates, and it's on iOS 16.6. So if we go to General and About, you'll see we're on iOS 16.6, and again, it's the phone my daughter's using. And as far as the battery health, it has 127 cycles according to Coconut Battery. So it's got a long way to go. Apple says it's designed for 2 years to have 80% left, or about 500 cycles. My 14 Pro Max definitely does not have that much battery life. So if we go in here, I've shown this many times before, but if we go in, I'm down to 90%. So it's not holding up as well, but this has been on many different betas, and I talked about that in a separate video. But the Plus seems to be holding up pretty well, but her overall usage is not huge either. You'll see she uses about 25% of her battery per day, only about 1 or 2 hours of screen on time going over the past week or so. So here, 2 hours or 1 hour and 56 minutes of screen on time, 9 hours and 58 minutes of screen off time, and 25% of her battery, meaning we would get about 8 hours of screen on time. Now, that's not the 12 to 14 hours we used to see with iOS 15 on the 13 Pro Max or something else like that, or the iOS 16 update. This is seemingly a little bit worse this year. I'm not sure if that's different things they're including, but this doesn't have an always on display, so that shouldn't be part of it. Now, as far as charging, this is charged the same way every day, similar to how I charge. It's typically on a MagSafe wireless charger and then placed on the bedside at night. However, if you want to charge on the go, today's video sponsor Anker has you covered with a new innovative multi-device fast charging lineup to charge everything everywhere faster all at once. Here is the new Anker Prime devices that power enough to fast charge your laptop and your phone at the same time with up to 250 watts of power from their new Anker Prime 27,650 milliamp hour power bank. It shows you exactly how much power is being sent to your devices at any time and allows you to optimize charging on your own schedule throughout the app. You can optimize it for the device itself, or you can optimize it for the output as well to slow down the charging overall if you don't want to push as much power through. When you want to recharge the power bank, you can just set it on an available dock, which can also charge other devices at the same time. And if you want a fast charging solution for your desk, this is the Anker Prime 240 watt desktop charger. It has a base that you can just sit it into, and it's super nice, very heavy duty feeling. The Anker Prime lineup features Active Shield 2.0 to help monitor temperature when charging and keep the devices from getting too hot. Check out the description to the new Anker Prime chargers below. Now, the display on the iPhone 14 Plus looks great. This, however, is not the best display Apple makes, and that disappoints quite a few people. We have a 6.7-inch display, 2,778 by 1,284 pixels at 458 pixels per inch. The problem is it doesn't have ProMotion, so it's only a 60 Hz display, so as you scroll, it's fairly smooth, but nothing like an iPhone 14 Pro Max, for example. So as you're swiping through, it will look very familiar if you're coming from a phone without ProMotion, maybe an iPhone 12, 12 Pro, something like that. But if you're coming from an iPhone 13 Pro or iPhone 14 Pro, you'll be disappointed with this. It's also not as bright and also doesn't have the dynamic island. Now, this could be a plus for some people, as I know not everyone likes it, but that's sort of the wave of the future and is expected on all phones with the iPhone 15. So if you don't care about that, it's not a big deal, and it's something that is just going to either be something you really like or don't really mind, or it doesn't bother you that it doesn't have the latest technology. It does have PWM, so it does flicker at a certain rate to actually control brightness. So as you bring the brightness up, it's flickering faster or slower, depending on if you bring it up or down. But these phones don't tend to bother my eyes so much. However, on the 14 Pro and Pro Max, they typically have close to DC dimming, meaning above a certain percentage of brightness, they don't really flicker and won't bother your eyes as much. However, for most people, I don't think the newer phones will bother your eyes either way. But at 240 frames per second, you can see it flickering compared to a 14 Pro Max where it doesn't appear to flicker at 240 frames per second. So if that's something that bothers your eyes, as it does me, however, this doesn't bother mine, you may want to consider a different phone. Now, the cameras are pretty good. They're reliable. The focus distance is actually something that's better than the 14 Pro Max, in my opinion. So, for example, if I go and take a photo, I can get pretty close here. So you'll see I get nice and close, and that's without macro. That's on 1x, and if I switch over to the 14 Pro Max, and we just bring it in the same way, I can't get as close and be in focus. And the reason is they've changed the focal distance due to the new 48 megapixel sensor in the 14 Pro Max. Also, some of the processing is different since they have a different sensor. So one thing, even though you have macro here on the 14 Pro Max where you can get super close, you can get pretty close in general just using the Plus because it has a pretty close focal distance. So that's something that's really nice, and many people like the processing on this phone better as far as the same photo is concerned. So it really depends who you ask, but I think this one does a better job. Now, that could be due to the processor or something else, but they both have very good video autofocus, especially for the forward-facing camera. So again, back in the camera, if we spin it around, you can see it's in focus, no problems here whatsoever, and as you bring it in or out, it's actually going to focus just as good as the 14 Pro Max. It has the same forward-facing camera, so that's something they really haven't compromised on with this whatsoever. The speakers are actually holding up pretty well over the past year or so. No complaints there. They seem to be nice and clear and loud, and if we go into YouTube maybe play one of my shorts here, we'll just scroll down, go into this one. Beta 4 is out, and here are the top 5 features. Within Messages, when you go into your apps, it has a redesign with circular. So at the highest volumes, no issues whatsoever. It sounds nice and clear. They don't seem to be any worse. And also my 14 Pro Max does seem to be worse than it was when it was new. So this seems to be holding up a little bit better than that. As far as overall performance, well, this is where it lacks a little bit. While you won't typically notice it because we have a 60 Hz display, going into things like music, swiping back, are nice and smooth. They're not going into the dynamic island, so you don't have that extra animation or extra load on the processor. But most things seem fast. If you want to go in and snap a photo really quickly, you can do that. If you want to switch over again to music, go back and forth, go and maybe set a timer here or stopwatch, you can do that and it works quickly. So I think this is really optimized even though it has last year's processor in it. Of course, that may be a disappointment for some, but it also seems to be pretty good on battery overall, as I've shown before. It also has crash detection and satellite connectivity, and I've actually used crash detection. I had an accident back in January, and it notified me on my 14 Pro Max and my Apple Watch, so that service actually works as designed and calls emergency services. Thankfully, it wasn't that big of a deal. I canceled it, but it was activated when I used it. And then of course we have satellite connectivity if we need it. If we test that out, it will find satellites nearby to help you communicate if you have no connection to maybe a provider, whether it's T-Mobile, AT&T, or Verizon in the United States, or Wi-Fi. If you don't have that option, you can then go in and try and find a satellite and then communicate, whether you're on a hike or something else. As far as overall connectivity, this phone, I haven't heard any complaints. My phone hasn't been that great with it, but this phone seems to be pretty good. If we turn off Wi-Fi here for just a moment, you'll see I have 5G UC with a couple bars. So really no complaints. I haven't heard a single thing from my daughter about that being a problem. She has complained about other little issues here and there, typically it just being buggy, and that's mostly software related. So I don't hear too much about connectivity issues. Some of the software had those issues, but I haven't really heard a whole lot about that. As far as using it daily, of course, it will get the job done. My daughter uses it mostly for Safari, Twitter, YouTube, games, and other things as well, and music and photos. So it's holding up really well that way. As far as the heat, well, this seems to stay pretty cool compared to my 14 Pro Max. That processor, despite it being newer, seems to run a little bit hotter than this one. This is nice and cool to the touch even after filming this video. Of course, it will get a little bit warm if you're charging or doing something else, but in general, it seems to be holding up pretty well. And now that we're getting close to the iPhone 15 launch, should you buy an iPhone 14 Plus? I would say hold off for one of two reasons. You could either wait so the price comes down on this. You could get them after they stop making them, as we expect an iPhone 15 Plus, or you might find some deals where you could trade in a phone and get it free. We've seen a lot of different carrier deals, but I would wait for the 15 Plus, where they're said to enhance the cameras and the processor and more. Hopefully they'll finally bring ProMotion. I think that's one of the big downsides of this phone compared to the 13 Pro. I honestly would buy a used 13 Pro or 13 Pro Max before I bought the 14 Plus. It seems to make more sense, especially if it's the same price. However, if it's not the same price and you get a deal through your carrier for the 14 Plus, pick that up if it's free or close to it. Of course, you've got the 14 as well if you want a little bit smaller phone. But I think typically I would go for a 13 Pro or Pro Max because they have the same sort of setup with the notch. We also don't have the dynamic island, and you gain an extra camera on the 13 Pros. So I would opt for that. However, again, if you had a great deal on the 14 Plus, then go for that. Let me know your opinion on the 14 Plus in the comments below. Do you have one? Is it something you've avoided? Do you think people should pick it up? Or what kind of deal did you get on it? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.